Welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Fitz. Fitz, how are you?
I'm doing fine, Ray. How are you this evening?
I'm good. You know, Fitz, today we're proud to host a special episode with former FBI agent Mike Pizzio. And we're going to talk about this new project that he's been working on. And it's something that our audience has never heard before. But we're going to let Mike talk about that. Mike, welcome to Cold Red. It's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Good to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, Mike, I was talking to you in real time back in the summer when you were driving up to Nova Scotia, I believe, right? Certainly into Canada, and putting this whole project together because you're a master. You can help us with the definitions. You're a scuba diver, but certainly master scuba diver. You've done all depths and gases in your tanks and all that stuff, and you've trained FBI scuba divers, whatever. And we're going to do something a little bit different here. We're going to show a trailer up front for an upcoming series on the History Channel called The Death Coast. It premieres on April 1st. And Mike here, as a retired FBI agent, master scuba diver, he's a part of this show. So why don't we show the trailer now, and we'll come back and talk about Mike's career and the series coming up that I know everyone's going to want to watch. Let's watch the trailer now.
There are thousands of shipwrecks down here with hundreds of millions of dollars worth of gold on them, and only I know where to find them. Find me something. Get me a gold.
Topside, we're descending down.
Find me something good. My father spent his life searching for gold, and now I do this because it's my family's legacy. It's all up to me now.
Storm is brewing.
Diving in these waters is like nothing anybody has ever seen. For hundreds of years, there have been tens of millions of dollars worth of coins sitting on the bottom. The Mary and the Joseph and the Neptune have never been found. I know there's something here.
Topside, you're gonna love this.
What do you got?
Oh my God, you're not gonna believe this.
Woohoo, boy! It's an American coin.
You're talking tens of thousands of dollars.
Wow. That's what we're looking for. The ocean here has been taking down ships for hundreds of years. We're about to sail into it. Ah! We're all missing a few screws, obviously.
Here we go! The storm's heading our way, fellas.
Whoa, boy! It's time for us to get out of here.
The current down here is insane.
Johnny, do you see them? Come on! The rocks! Get them away from the rocks! This treasure has been missing for 300 years.
Strong hit here.
Go get the goddamn pry bar. And if this is it, boy, we're into something. What is it?
Huge.
Treasure hunting is in my blood. I will die a treasure hunter.
I got seasick almost watching that trailer, and I wasn't even on the boat. I was just looking at a video of it. But I'll tell you what, Mike, and I know there's many stories and sub-stories to it, but we usually like to go in chronological order on Cold Red because we have a lot of listeners, younger and older out there, and they want to know, how do people get to where we are right now in whatever field the person is. So if you don't mind, I'd like to just walk the audience through where you're born, went to school, and how everything came together where you wound up in the FBI as a dive instructor, among other things, and running some undercover operations in charter boats off of Miami. So just give our audience a background on your sort of your life history.
Sure, Fitz. I grew up in New Jersey, and the whole water thing came about because my mom was deathly afraid of the water. She couldn't swim. So she took me and my sister down to the lake. We started swimming lessons and all that, and that naturally occurred. We went into competitive swimming. So I swam competitively from grade school, high school, through college. The lifeguards were all my heroes, and most of those guys were all scuba divers. My attempts to emulate them, I went and became certified at 15. I was diving a couple of years prior to that with those lifeguards at the lake. And that was kind of the beginning of the whole.
So your first entry into the water with a scuba tank was in a lake in New Jersey.
The lake in New Jersey, yeah, I was about 12, I think, 12 or 13.
Was there much to see on the bottom of that lake?
It was a sand quarry, so it was pretty benign. But being underwater was the fun thing. So, And it began a lifelong pursuit that's got us to where we are now.
So at some point, college, and then what was after that?
Yeah, I went to school at the University of Delaware. I wanted to be a marine scientist because of the diving, and I ended up getting a job at Geological Survey. So I was afforded the opportunity prior to graduating to actually work in the field. And I found it to be extraordinarily boring. Okay, well, what am I going to do with a college degree that's not going to bore me to tears? And I thought either military or law enforcement. I ended up making the choice to go to law enforcement. And my first job was a deputy U.S. Marshal in Washington, D.C. Did that for about a year and a half. Back in those days, the marshals were GS5s and starting FBI agent was a GS10, so the equation was pretty simple for me. I put an application in, and 6 months later, I was in the academy.
Where'd you start out with the marshals at, Mike?
I was in Washington, D.C., which was notoriously tough place to be a marshal because D.C. is a federal city. There is no sheriff. So the marshal is the sheriff. So we had fresh lockups in the Superior Court. We were doing evictions from public housing, mental health orders, escapees, all kinds of stuff that most deputy marshals don't see in the rest of the nation. You bring up to other marshals and ask you where you were, you tell them you're in Superior Court, and they just laugh because they know it's one of the tougher assignments, less fun assignments in the Marshal Service.
Marshals don't always get all the publicity some other alphabet agencies do, but I've always met good guys and women and agents that work for them, and they seem dedicated to their cause. A lot of them, searching for fugitives, what have you. And I was with them way back in the early 80s. We locked up this international hitman. He really was a hitman, even involved in the Vatican scandal back in the 80s, where remember the John Paul I, the Pope only lived 1 month. And that's been a very fishy thing. But this guy was involved in some of that. So I've always admired the marshals. Did your buddies give you a hard time when you said, "Hey guys, I'm out of here. I'm going to the FBI"?
I was surprised at the response. It was very positive. I mean, I got a little bit of chiding, but I remember the U.S. Marshal at the time, Herb Rutherford, was a great guy. And he said to me, "Hey, listen, go to the Bureau. If you have any problems, you always have a job here." Which, when you leave one agency and you're not sure how you're going to do in the next academy, gave me great solace. So I have nothing but good things to say about the Marshal Service.
You were in Glencoe for the Marshals training, correct?
Yeah, that was kind of fun because I was actually only in the Marshals about a year and 4 months going to the FBI Academy. The similarities were quite profound. So I found the academy to be pretty simple, and I ended up being first in my class academically, mostly because I already been through the whole thing just about a year before, much to the chagrin of some of the lawyers in the class.
That's nice. That's nice.
I can relate to that too.
Knuckle drag. Marshall finished up first in the academic portion.
So your pension begins, though, with your EOD with the marshals. It's all federal government and law enforcement. Okay. So graduate the academy. What year are we talking? And where's your first office?
I got in the Bureau EOD of March of '87, went in the academy, came out of the academy in June. First office, I was in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I got there and I was surprised. I got very lucky, got on a personal and property crime squad, which back then was bank robbery, fugitives, auto theft, heavy equipment, that type of stuff. So got to go right in, and you leave the marshals doing fugitive work and go right into the Bureau and doing fugitive work. And of course, bank robbery. You were in a bank robbery squad in New York, right?
I was, yeah. C-19 at JTF2. That's where Ray Carr and I first met through some paperwork back and forth, searching for common bank robbers that hit both cities. Yeah, I went up talking to a lot of guys on bank robbery squads and fugitive squads around the country. A lot of it would be paperwork. Every once in a while, you'd call up on the phone just to kind of get some more information that maybe you wouldn't put in print necessarily. Yeah, so I was. I don't think there are that many bank robberies around the country anymore. I don't think many FBI offices have entire squads like they used to.
One of my last squads in the Bureau was a bank robbery and fugitives, which wasn't quite as excited about doing it when I was young. 25 years later, I was like, this is not the way I remember it. Banks open on Saturdays, so we had bank robberies on Saturdays, and came close on a couple of near shootings, and I was like, I'm too old for this. It's time for me to call it quits. We had a bank robbery task force, bank robbery and fugitive task force in Miami.
And Ray worked bank robberies too, I know.
I did in Philly. And Philly was Squad 10. when I was there was bank robberies, fugitives, and terrorism in the early 90s before. Then after 93, that's when they split it. And they developed their own terrorism squad. And in 95, they developed the fugitive squad, and they put the fugitive squad down at the U.S. Navy Yard, the Philadelphia Navy Yard. So they had an off-site position. Then the bank robbery squad just stayed. And then I stayed another year and then went out to an RA. And RA is a resident agency, and it was Newtown Square. And that's where I kind of finished out my career, kind of running it out there, which was a lot of fun.
They all say. Mike, I'm trying to think, was it your first office? When were you you were in at least one shootout, and was that in your first office?
Yeah, it was in
Knoxville?
Knoxville, Tennessee. I was there. I was working bank robberies, and I had a serial job, where I always kind of laugh when they say serial bank robber, like there's any other kind. Bank robbers rob banks so they get caught. They don't go to the bank and then, okay, I'm happy. I've got all the money I ever wanted. They just keep robbing. We had a guy that would hit us a number of times. I had him for, I think, 4 or 5 banks in our district. And then I forget the form, but there was a form you used to fill out every time you were a case agent on a bank robbery. And it went to all the surrounding offices. It gave you all the MO and height and weight and description. And I used to read those forms, and I ended up linking together. I think it was like 20 some odd bank robberies this guy had done with his getaway driver and his cohort. And one morning we get a call, and First Tennessee Bank out on Inskip Road had been robbed. Bank robber did quite well. Let a round go off in the bank. The guy was especially violent. What was very interesting was a former military police guy witnessed it happening as the bank robbers came out, followed the car, did a parallel surveillance, followed the car through a neighborhood, through 2 drop switch cars, and then got him in and put him down in a house.
Wow, that's a good witness.
Oh yeah, great witness. I mean,
And pre-cell phones, so he couldn't call you guys up or anything.
No, this was before cell phones. This was 1989, and he got on the horn, and police were out there, had the place surrounded. TV crews were out there before we even arrived, and turned out I was a case agent. If I remember correctly, it was 138 rounds were fired in total. Yeah, the guy stayed in the house. The female getaway driver gave up. The other bank robber gave up, and the other guy stayed in the house. His name was Jesse Casto Adam. And SWAT team ended up injecting gas grenades, pump guns. And it was kind of funny because we're all standing outside, and we watched one of them go in the side of the house through the glass, come out, punch through the other side of the house, hit a telephone pole, blow up. Let me put your finger up in the air, like, okay, we're getting gas. Now, here comes the CS gas. But the bank robber didn't seem to care about the gas in the house. And he responded by emptying a shotgun, a 38 and a 45 at me and the guys that I was in the car with. I responded with an MP5. And then it was 4 hours later, he gave up on the porch. He ended up shooting a police officer, got hit in the arm and the chest. Vest stopped it. He ended up climbing out onto the porch on his back with a peace sign up and a 45 pointed at his chest. He pulled the magazine out. He had 1 round in the chamber. What he didn't know was he had the same gun I was carrying, which was a Smith Model 645 that from the factory came out with a magazine disconnect safety. So he couldn't have shot himself or anybody else. Tried to talk him out, and he wouldn't do anything. And then finally, the police officer decided to shoot the gun out of his hand. So shot the gun. The bullet bounced off the frame of the gun. We had slow motion from the TV cameras. The bullet went directly over the police officer's head, inches. I recoiled back. Guy looks at the gun frame was broken, and he gave up. But the police officer, when I showed him the path of the bullet that he almost ate, I think decided at that point that wasn't probably the best idea.
I used to love when the public would see a shootout of some sort with police, FBI, whomever, and well, why don't you just shoot the gun out of his hand? Because the Lone Ranger always used to do that, and the other cowboys. But I always say it's almost impossible to do this. But here, Mike, in the case you just described, the officer did it, but that bullet ricocheted back and could have killed him It sounds like. Unfortunately, it didn't. You said someone had a vest and was shot in the vest and an arm.
Yeah, a uniformed police officer.
Okay.
We,
Not you, luckily.
we called him. He was on the back of the house. After I fired in the front window, bank robber went out the side and shot at the police officer. Hit him in the vest with a 45, hit him also in the forearm, exited his tricep. But he made it. He was okay. And I think he just retired recently.
So in the Bureau, sometimes if we do a good job, we get attaboy letters, could be one thing, but we also can get cash awards. And they always come not right after an arrest or something, but when the person is, tried, convicted, pleads guilty, whatever, the case is completely over and everything went well. Sometimes FBI agents can get awards, and it could be a few $100s, could be a few $1,000s. And Mike, you have a story when you received an award for that shootout and catching that serial bank robber. We'll call him that. But the day that you got the award started out nice, but it kind of ended strangely. Can you share it with our audience, that story?
Yeah,
You'll appreciate this.
The Bureau gives and takes back. After the case was over, the bank robber got 138 years state and 26 years consecutive mandatory federal. We ended up solving, I think I took confessions on 12 or so bank robberies, about double that armed robberies. So those were all pushed out to all the other field offices and to the local police departments that had those. He was a one-man crime wave. And I guess about a year after that, I got an incentive award from the director. I actually got a call from headquarters. They had just instituted the medal program. And I had, besides return fire, we had a civilian who was caught up in the middle of the whole thing where we were getting shot at. And I kind of got him out of there using myself to block field of fire. So we got an incentive award. I turned down the medal because at that point it was brand new. The only guys that had gotten it at that point were the Miami shootout guys. You guys, Miami shootout guys. I didn't think anything I did came close to that level, and I turned it down.
Just to interrupt you here, we had Ed Morales on as a guest our first season from that infamous shootout in 1986 in Miami of a couple of bank robbers, armored car robberies. And anyone who's interested in his compelling story, go back to Cold Red season 1. He was my class counselor too at the academy later in 87. You were already gone by then, Mike.
Yeah, I admitted it a couple times. And actually, I don't know if you know this or not, but as I was a firearms instructor in Knoxville, New York, and Miami, and we had a certain shotgun program we did where you had to rack the shotgun with one hand and return fire with one because of Ed and his situation. And that shootout, he was shot in one arm and was able to defend himself and fire back with a shotgun with one arm. And that became part of our training from Ed.
As it should, and we all went through that. So, Mike, you helped rescue this civilian guy, got him away from danger. And I think you said about a year or so later, an award. Continue.
Yeah, so I get a letter commendation, a very flowery one-page letter from the director, and check for $500. I think it was $500. I forget.
It's not bad for a 1990 or so.
No, yeah, it was great. As was the tradition back then. You pretty much threw that check on the bar, and
That's right.
I invited as many as the police officers because I had kind of worked a lot with the police there, and I invited all those guys to come out to a fairly nice little joint, and I threw the money in the bar, and I ordered some wings and some nachos, and the other agents that were out there who didn't, get planned on spending it all. So the night tore on, and people kind of went home. We were down to the last couple of us, and I was there with my best friend, agent, and the PLA. Oddly enough, and there was this.
That's the principal legal advisor,
That's
right?
Yeah, they changed when I was
agent.
Right. And we're just sitting there minding our business, having a drink, and this guy sitting next to me is drinking B-52 shooters straight up and martini strips side by side. And I'm like, okay. And he started giving me a hard time. I don't know, about drinking beer or something. And I just said, oh, it's your business. So he spilled out his Visa, and he takes the pen and he stabs me in the face with the pen.
Hmm.
So, having been the boxer for a number of years, I responded with a right cross, and down he went, and I kind of escorted him out the door, sat back down, had another beer. So the Bureau did not think that was a great thing, and I ended up getting a much longer 2-page letter of a reprimand and a week on the bricks. As you know what those mean, that's a week without pay. So I was painting the house the next that week.
Let me ask you, because I know this happened, and I think that's bull, what happened to you. First of all, I can't believe that they would do that. But the Bureau's been known for eating their own. But did everybody chip in on the squads?
They did. I refused it.
Did you?
I refused to take it.
We did that numerous times with guys. They would come back and we go back to the bar and they throw it back, the money back on the bar, and they would drink it. And some guy said, I made more money from the contributions than I would have got if I got paid.
That was typically the case. I was a first office agent, a very small office. I was kind of a renegade. I had my nose smacked more than once, so I figured I didn't want to make a big deal about it. But the funny thing about that, Ray, was I was like, well, this is BS. Okay, all I did was defend myself. I didn't start this.
Exactly.
I ended it, but I didn't start it.
Correct.
And I went in and talked to an upper management person who I will not name. And he said, well, you know what? You want to fight it? Go ahead. We'll just ask you what car you were driving.
They're going to get you. They're going to get you, Mike. Yeah, yeah, they're going to get you. You say, oh yeah, and you know what? Well, see, was the supervisor there having a couple beers?
I don't believe so. He was a little old lady. I had a little old lady first office supervisor who was.
I hate it because they're always they'll always circle. They circle the sharks. I can't stand it. They do. They circle the sharks.
Back then, I laugh, but back then, initially,
yeah. If they want you, you're an FOA, first office agent. So you're sitting there, you're thinking, I'll just take the hit and just move on.
That's what I did.
Yeah, and like Stalin says back in the day, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. Show me the agent, I will find the violation.
Right.
If they really want to go through your paperwork and whether you dotted every I and crossed every T and what car you drove when, did you go a block out of the way if it's your bureau car? God forbid if you had one beer under your belt. But yeah, I haven't heard too many stories like your, Mike, where in the morning
you're
get
the
a word letter.
You're the bum, right? And so I have the 1-page letter, which is the commendation letter, and it has the date of the offer, the date of the letter, and then the 2-page letter telling me I'm a piece of garbage is dated the same day, which I kind of like. That I was going to frame them all together. So on the same day, I was heroic and the finest spirits of the FBI, and the next day I was the worst agent they ever walked the block. But it was all on the same day.
Let me tell you how we dealt with that in Philly. We had a SWAT op. We were going out for a bank robbery suspect up in North Philly. And we hit this house, and the guys went in the front door with flashbangs. Myself and 2 other guys were out the back side. The flashbangs went off. We're on a hill. Everybody comes running out. We take them all down. I had an MP5. We laid them all out on the hill, right? We haven't cuffed them yet. But as soon as they get in, a guy comes out to the back door and says, let's go, fellow firefighters. It was the wrong house. So he said, let's go, fellow firefighters. So we identified ourselves at the Philadelphia Fire Department, and we left. We never heard anything about it because they took the front door, the back door, damages. So that's how we kind of dealt with it in Philly.
Everyone's got stories like that. I remember when I was we only had 2 guys in a car, and in between evictions, we would go to warrants. Well, you're supposed to go 10-7 and get back up and all that kind of thing. That's not how you do it. You go to the back door, I'm going to go to the front door, I'm going to knock U.S. Marshal, you say come in, and then we're going to go to the back both doors at the same time. That's how it works. Okay, no problem.
Did that many times.
Mm-hmm.
So Knoxville was your first office, probably 2 years there, Mike? And off to New York?
4 years in Knoxville almost to the day, and then 7 years in New York.
Was that like coming home for you because you're from North Jersey originally, or did that make any difference?
I'm from Northwest Jersey. I'm from Morris County. New York, I grew up, there were apple orchards and horse farms, so I wasn't really near the city. And at that time, if I remember correctly, for every 2 sets of orders the Bureau was cutting, one agent would quit. And that's when they did the New York demonstration project with the, prior to having locality pay, they had 25% and automatic pay raises through grades and all that to incentivize agents to stay there, which, um, it made it easier. You could actually afford a house. I mean, I was only, I think, in 11 when I went up to be 11 in New York. That's not easy to do. I lived all the way down south by the beach. I lived down in Howell Township. So it was, I used to lie to myself and say it was an hour and 15-minute ride, but it was closer to an hour and 45 or two. I was
So you're in New York. What kind of work are you doing in New York? Organized crime, I believe, if I recall.
Yeah, I was on an OC squad. I was on Colombo Manano squad. And the highlight of that was the Colombo War happened at that time. I think it was went on for about 18 months. It was a factional dispute over the control of the family. Carmine Persico was in prison, and Vic Arena was trying to take over. Traditionally, if the boss goes to prison, he gives away the reins, and that didn't happen this time. Again, this is kind of from memory, if I remember correctly. And ended up shooting, killing 18 guys in 18 months. The worst thing was I think they missed at one time. They shot some kid in a bagel shop. So it was kind of a mess, and administratively became a nightmare too, because supervisor got accused. He had a TE informant,
Top echelon informant.
Had a top echelon informant, and he was accused of providing information to the TE source. And then he was actually later on, well after I left New York, was indicted for murder by the Manhattan DA's office, went to trial, and was found not guilty. It was a very, very, very uncomfortable place to be when that was happening on the squad.
During this time, are you still diving?
Yeah.
Knoxville as well as
New York? I didn't do quite as much diving in Knoxville. I would do it when I would come home to New Jersey and go out with friends. And I did actively continue diving all through college, all through the different field offices. We were diving in lakes. It was pretty funny. There was a point, it used to call Point 19 off of one of the lakes up in Knoxville, where they would go and dump stolen cars. And it was like about 130 some feet. It was fairly deep. So I'd go down there and, write down the VINs and bring them up and identify where the cars were just for fun. I picked up a BB gun there too, and I gave that to my son. That was his first BB gun. At first I thought it was a rifle, and I think it was a BB gun. But I would continue diving there, and that, like I said, it's always been a part of my life.
NYPD had a pretty good dive team.
Yeah,
they had a pretty good team.
I did some very deep diving with one of their members. It was a technical mixed gas diver. We knew each other in New Jersey. We did some dives in New Jersey, but we also went to Greece, and we did a History Channel special out there diving a ship called the Britannic. And the Britannic was Titanic's sister ship. There were 3 ships of that manufactured by Merlin and Wolff in Ireland. The Olympic, then the Titanic, and the Britannic. Olympic didn't have any real problems. Titanic, the story. The Britannic was put into service in World War I as a hospital ship and hit a mine and sank in 400 feet of water in Greece. And we did an expedition on that.
Nice.
It was after the Bureau, right? You were with the...
I was actually still a Bureau. I was still an agent. It was 2006. And we went out there. It was a big ensemble. We had Brits, we had Italian divers, we had Americans, and TV production company. The whole shooting match was a 2-hour special on History Channel.
Wow.
Yeah, it was.
Did you do that under the auspices of the Bureau or take time off?
I was on AL.
Yeah, okay. Annual leave, gotcha.
Yep, I was on AL. So I did a number of productions when I was still an agent. Matter of fact, one of them, we did one pirate shipwrecks in Madagascar, and I was gone for a month. And I was on AL, and I was offered, I think about $1,000 a week. So it was like $4,000 for salary, and I had turned it down because I was an agent. I didn't feel like jumping through the hoops to prove it wasn't work related and all that. I just keep it.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you with that.
Those rules have lightened up in the Bureau. People can do part-time work, and I'm sure what you're describing, as long as you had your official time off, whatever, you could probably do that nowadays. But in the early days, you couldn't do anything on the side. I invested in real estate, the only thing I was allowed to do, or the stock market, and you could be like a landlord, so to speak, but you couldn't do any kind of bartending or security or even digging trenches on weekends or something with a construction crew.
And I knew what was required. And I was like, it's not worth the grief. I don't need the money. I'm fine. I just wanted to do it for the experience. But then, I was still diving in New York. I was diving all the time up there. Got into mixed gas, not rebreather, and mixed gas deep diving. I was diving the Andrea Doria. I became crew on one of the dive boats up there called the Seeker, and we were out diving the Andrea Doria, which is 100 miles off of Montauk, 240 feet of water, 700-foot long ship. You'd go into the cruise ship and you'd go try to find china and silverware and everything else that's on a cruise ship. So I was doing that, and back in the bureau, I was on OC for 3 years, and I was on an Asian task force for 3 years. And the last year I was there, I was on a HIDTA task force, on a drug task force with the PD.
HIDTA, just for our listeners, is high density drug trafficking. Just so everybody knows what that is. You wind up in Florida. Is that correct? You wind up down in Miami?
Yeah, OP'd to Miami.
And you're working drugs down there?
I was on a drug squad for about a year, and actually, kind of funny story. I had just gotten into the division. Nobody knew who I was. There was like one or two guys that I really knew. My acting supervisor was the first officer with me in Knoxville. They gave me a squad. Gave me a lead case, and it was basically a fugitive lead on a drug squad. And we ended up locating the guy based upon some information late on a Sunday night. And we blocked it off, called the uniform guys, and it was late. It was 10 o'clock at night on a Sunday night. We're setting up. I'm talking to the uniform guys. We went to uniform presence. Out comes the guy. He was wanted for, I think, a couple of murders on a drug, Jamaican posse kind of thing. And come out of the car, he gets and runs. I'm like, well, he didn't get the memo. You're not supposed to run from the FBI. We don't run. So go chasing him out through the woods, and I had a 45 in my hip and a 30 in my ankle, and I had a radio in my back pocket. And he jumps in, and now if he'd gone left, he'd outrun me, no problem. If he'd gone right, he would have outrun me, no problem. But he decides to jump in the canal. Well, I was a lifeguard and swimmer and diver and all that, so I go in after him, and he ended up not doing. He drank a little water, let's say. But then I had to rescue him and bring him back in. He wasn't feeling too great. And we got him in an ambulance, and off he went. But while that happened, radio fell out of my pocket. And the canals in Florida are pretty much filled with alligators. And the people said there was like a 12-foot alligator in there that lived there. So I get dragged up to the front office the following Monday morning, and they're like, what's happened to the guy? Well, he's in the hospital. They had he's got pneumonia from drinking water and canal water. And they're like, who are you? And when did you get here? Are you going to cause this kind of trouble the whole time? The boss thought it was great because the boss who was acting the SAC at the time was an old fugitive guy, so he thought it was the greatest thing in the world.
Absolutely.
But when I walked in, the first thing he said to me, so you're the guy that lost my radio.
I've heard that.
Well, if you lose a radio, the whole bureau has to recode, right? And then there's all kinds of paper to jump through. So about a week later, I grabbed some dive gear and went down to the canal, and then jumped in the canal, ran a little search pattern myself, found a radio. Now, the radio was in this canal and had little snails, little clams attached to it because it was down there about a week, right? So I'm just thinking this is the funniest thing. I walk in the squad area, and there's the SAC. I go, hey, boss, I got your radio back. And it's still dripping water out of it. He said, you went back in the canal? You're not right. So the end of the story is I walked into the radio room, and I put the radio down, and still got water coming out of it. I go, hey, my radio's not working. It was fine. Like, you're not getting out of here with that. You got to do some paper rubbing. I don't know what you're talking about. Radio was fine. Don't know what happened. And there's clams and snails on it. So the tech guys are happy with me.
That's a great story. It's a great story, Mike. And you know what? It's so true because same thing happened to me. You're running, you're chasing somebody, you drop a radio, and he goes, hey, you lost my radio. Like, who died and made you boss it? All of a sudden, you own this property.
You own this property.
Right. Exactly.
But the SAC looked at me like I lost my gourd because I was still kind of, the t-shirt was still wet. I didn't bring a towel with me. I just put my clothes back on over the top of the swimsuit. He's like, you went and got the radio. I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't lose it. I said, I never lost the radio, boss. I knew where it was. It wasn't lost. It's just I couldn't grab it at that moment.
Right.
Luckily, Gator didn't swallow it.
Right. That's true. Or you know, but your experience doing that led into a very interesting position that they put you in. Would you want to, you know what I'm talking about here, Mike?
You know, I probably would have, even if they had said, hey, easy come, easy go, it's a radio, no big deal, I probably would have gone back and got it anyway. I don't like losing. First of all, you know, I've been doing, even when I was in high school, the lake that I was a lifeguard at, we had a dive team, a volunteer dive team. So I did search and recovery pretty much from the beginning. And then when I got to New York, I volunteered for a fire department, volunteer fire department, and has a hazard. What was it? It was OEM, Awesome Emergency Management, New Jersey. We had a dive team, and I said, you know what? I'm going to be in New York for a while. I want to be part of the community. Maybe I'll volunteer for this. Well, 6 months after doing that, I was running the team, and I ended up, you know, getting some higher certifications because I was in charge of this search and recovery team. So finding things underwater, I don't let things get lost underwater. That's not acceptable to me. So even if I hadn't had the threat of paperwork over my head or another letter of censure for losing a radio, I was going to go back and get it.
Did you run an undercover operation where you were the boat captain?
Yeah. I was, like I said, I was on a drug squad for about a year, and we had a undercover yacht in the Miami office, and there was only a very small program. There was only New York had one, but it was about as undercover as nothing. I mean, they used it for dignitaries, and they had it at Flight 800. You know, where everybody in the world was at Flight 800, so they had the boat out there for that. So it wasn't really undercover. But we used ours solely undercover, and we had cases from all the field office would come down and use it. It was a wide variety of casework. Everybody thinks, oh, you're doing drugs, you're doing drugs, you're doing drugs. We actually had very few drug cases. We had a number of times where we would go offshore to do a drug boat-to-boat transfer, which of course got, you know, the field office management all up in arms, like, oh my God, you're going out. You know how management wanted to always control everything and have everything in their hands. Well, I'm offshore, they can't do anything to me. You know, and I'm like, I'm in charge, I'll take care of it, don't worry about it. You know, I ran into a lot of problems with upper management on that boat because, you know, they thought, you know, we were always just out there sitting on the boat drinking away and having a blast. You know, the other times were, you know, I'm running a vessel all the way from Fort Lauderdale to Key West to Panama City Beach, Florida, and then out to New Orleans. I mean, this is not easy stuff. You know, you've got a $3 million boat. If you're running aground, you cause hundreds of thousands of dollars of damage. And it doesn't take that much to make a mistake. And even though I've got a 100-ton master's license, Upon Oceans, and all these kind of endorsements to my license, I was basically a weekend warrior. You know, I wasn't running a boat like a real yacht captain who's out there 7 days a week and running the boat all over the world for their multimillionaire owner. I had time at the wheel, but I didn't have as much time at the wheel as a lot of guys would have had for a boat that size. Knock on wood, I never put a scratch on the thing in 4 years. Never sank it, never had anybody hurt.
But just to explain, I mean, there'd be undercover drug operations, and to impress the bad guys.
That was the main thing, Fitz, exactly. It was to establish wealth. So let's say you're the UCA, right? You guys are the UCAs, and you got a public corruption case, or you got a drug case, or you got whatever the case is, and you're bankrolling this thing, and you're high rolling with these guys. You bring them down on the boat. I'm the captain. I got a crew member. The crew member stays out of the way. The whole boat's wired for audio and video. Okay. And you come on the boat. I got booze. I got food. I got everything on there. You know, you guys want to have your conversations. I'll be out of the way. Turn on the cameras and turn on the lights. And you're going to go like, hey, we're going to go offshore. We'll go offshore and turn off the engines. Nobody's out there. Nobody can hear you. Well, yeah, we hear everything. It was basically to establish wealth and to back up the UCAs on a variety of cases they had.
You know, when you do make that transition and you wind up as running the Miami dive team, that's really run out of SERG, right? And SERG is a critical incident response group. Isn't that
The dive
that dive
was
team run
actually
out of
run
there?
out of the lab. It was run out of ERT.
Oh, okay.
ERT being, for your viewers, the evidence response team, or what they're probably most seeing CSI. Our CSI guys are evidence response team. The dive team's name was USER, Underwater Search and Evidence Response Team. It was owned by the laboratory. The laboratory made it, worked it all.
So besides evidence recovery, did you do any search and rescue with your team?
Excuse me. No, we were strictly an evidence response team. We were not a rescue team. We were not an assault team. I did work quite closely with the other teams. If they needed a boat, I provided it. SWAT had a boat. I helped them with outfit their thing. And when they were doing in-water work, I would be the diver, would be their safety diver for them. But we were entirely the evidence response team. We were all around the United States, and we even did a job in Iraq back during the insurgency war. We ran attempted recovery in the canal off the Euphrates River in 2005.
I know HRT. I actually was going to try out for that team back in the early '90s, and then I had some family issues that I couldn't make the move. But you know, I was a pretty good swimmer in my day, and I know they had an underwater team, a dive team. I thought of maybe getting the training in that. Did you ever do any episodes with those guys or missions, specialized missions, doing any type of underwater insertions, or did they do that on their own?
No, they would do that stuff on their own. I mean, a lot of those guys. I worked with HRT a little bit when I was in Iraq. I did 2 rotations in Iraq and a dive mission in Iraq. And we had HRT advisors with us. We had the 101st Airborne was our safety team. But the dive team, we didn't do any type of SWAT type work at all. We were strictly evidence response. Sometimes it brought us to some pretty not great locations or some real tough cases. That one in Iraq was monumental. I mean, putting that together was tough. We had 2 guys, including a unit chief, who keeled over from heat. It was always good to have a unit chief there to look over what you're doing, not knowing anything, and then cause a problem because he passed out. So we had to throw 2 bags of IV on him. And
That's in their job application. They have to
yeah,
know what they're doing and pass out.
he wasn't real happy when I told the stories about how he passed out all over at the laboratory. He fainted a couple of times. We had to bring him back, and people were dying laughing.
You know, one of the things I always think is, I know there's high risk environment, that you guys go into, but one of the worst things you got to tell me is the extreme cold, frozen water.
Well, one of our first dives New York had a scuba team back as early as I think like 85. And they were the only dive team, evidence type team in the Bureau. And then in 2003, ERT decided to expand ERT to include underwater. They roped in the New York scuba team, made them the New York USERP team. And then they went and they trained up LA, and then they trained up Miami, and they trained up Washington, D.C. And those are the 4 teams that I still believe are in existence, those 4 teams. But we did a dive in Grand Forks, North Dakota. And of course, New York kind of had the New York attitude because they were around the longest, so they knew everything. We didn't know anything. Even though I probably had more dives than our entire team combined. We did a dive under about 18 inches of ice in Grand Forks, North Dakota. We were looking for you may remember the case. There was a girl who was kidnapped from a mall, put in a van. It was back in like 2004, I think. But anyway, it was a big national news. And they found her shoe at the base of a bridge going over the Red River, which runs through North Dakota. And we cut a hole in the ice, cut a triangle in the ice. We did a number of ice dives up that way. And actually, ice dive, being underwater is the best position because water doesn't get any colder than 32, minus 25 on the surface, not including the wind chill. Okay.
Right.
So the guys up there are freezing to death. Well, we move out, we're doing our search patterns, and I'm all the way out. The umbilical that we use, we have surface applied gas. and I was like about 150, 175 feet from the hole. We would have gas being surface supplied with communications. I have a thing called a pneumo, which gives you your depth. And you would have a base station there, and they would have tanks feeding it, and the guys would have to switch out the tanks. When pressure got low, you had another tank on, you switch it over to another one, and you change out the tanks. Well, apparently the cold got the better of them up surface, and I'm doing the search, and all of a sudden I hear a pitch in the hose sounded different. I knew what was going on. They ran us out of air. So we had a switching block on your chest. You just turn that block, and then you'd have a scuba tank on your back that would feed your full face mask with that gas. We call it an EGS, emergency gas supply. So I opened the block up early because I knew it was happening before I even ran out of gas. And I go, hey, topside, wake up. Now, the other guy, when you can't breathe, you can't speak. Okay, all you hear is like that. So I go hightailing over to get him because he obviously hadn't gotten to his emergency gas supply. Luckily, the topside turned on the gas on the other bottle right away, and instantaneously we had air back. And I was like, thanks, New York guys. Good job. Who's buying me booze tonight?
That's right. That's right. Wow.
And, it's adverse environments. You're in a very cold location, and they're up there. And that's why I always said whenever I had somebody working the console, I wanted two bodies there. I wanted two guys staring at the console, because if one guy loses concentration for a minute, it can be bad news for the guys underwater.
Yeah.
I would always have size. Same thing when I was running the boat, running the yacht, running the FBI dive boats. Two guys at the helm. If I'm driving, I want another guy up there because I may not notice that boat over there on my far left coming at me that I didn't see him. Okay, so two sets of eyes, always better.
Mike, you mentioned Iraq, and during the we'll call it the Second Iraq War, you were there. You went 3 different TDYs, temporary duties, and the FBI was enlisting people to go over there and assist the military in various functions. But at least one time over there for you, you referenced it earlier. It was a special kind of a dive. What were you looking for then? I think you said the Euphrates River.
Yeah, I was over 3 times. The first time I was on a regular rotation. It was rotation 14, I think. We had about 30 guys went over there, and I ended up working attacks on U.S. personnel, so terrorism. I worked specifically on a case in Mosul where a State Department special agent was killed on a V-bed attack, and that's a vehicle-borne improvised explosive device, car bomb to make it short. Hit a State Department convoy, killed 2 Blackwater contractors and 1 State Department special agent, and that was my case. The third time I was there, I was working on what they call the Iraqi-U.S. Major Crimes Task Force, where we had an FBI agent, a DE agent, a DE agent, and an ATF agent, along with 2 Iraqi special police who were polygraphed every 6 months. We had an interpreter, and we just worked a variety of cases there. The dive job was in between, and that was the USERT job. There was a lot of questions about whether we should do that job or not. It was a very high-profile case. It was a case where there was I believe it is Army 101st, but don't quote me on it. That was Sergeant Green, and it was big news at one point also. And some of his soldiers decided to be a good idea to follow a 14-year-old girl home and then rape her in her home and then murder her and her family, which didn't sit well with the local Iraqi population and caused an awful lot of problems for our soldiers there because we weren't winning hearts and minds doing things like that. So supposedly the weapon they used, and they burned the house down. The weapon they used was the family's AK-47. And if you've never been to Iraq, you can go ride around in houses all over the United States and find a Daisy Red Ryder BB gun. In Iraq, everybody's got an AK-47. That's the gun. That's all they have. So every house had homeowner had a gun, had an AK-47. So this AK-47 was supposedly used to kill the daughter and the parents, and then it was supposedly thrown in this canal. Now, we found out that Navy OD divers went to go dive that canal, couldn't find it. But the assistant U.S. attorney, because Sergeant Green was removed from the military entirely, justice couldn't prosecute. So it went to the assistant U.S. attorney, who asked the Bureau to send our team out to go dive this. And it was a very dangerous dive. We had a culvert pipe. We had a 50 roll of concertina wire that got blown up by an IED. So you have razor wire throughout the dive. Navy EOD divers told me they tested the water and it came back non-specified nerve agent. Air temperature was 130 degrees, and it was an area that was being mortar attacked on a fairly regular basis. It was called the Triangle of Death between the cities of Mamadiya, Yusufia, and Katamia, I believe. And that was all where this took place, this event. Going to the dock.
Other than all that, it was a nice little
Other than that,
paradise getaway.
there were no sharks, which was good.
Or gators.
No gators. Didn't have that. I never got losing a radio. I was really concerned because when I knew that the air temperature was 130, I was like, how am I going to keep these divers cool? So I went down before we left Quantico, before we got on the plane. I went and bought every ice pack I could find from Walgreens and CVS and Walmart. I just bought as many as I could. So in having their dry suit, they're wearing a black vulcanized rubber dry suit, 103-degree temperature. I'm breaking ice packs and throwing ice packs down their back. Now, luckily, the water was actually pretty cool, and they were like, Jesus, you're freezing us to death. I said, look, I can't have you passing out from the heat. It takes us to suit up a diver for a full face mask, dry suit, surface supply comms. All this takes, a good 25, 30 minutes to do all the checks, make sure they're ready to go. And they're sitting there baking in a black rubber dry suit. So that was a trying mission. And we later found out that the guy that told whatever investigator or USA just lied to them about where the gun went. So it was all for naught.
I'd like to change gears here a little bit. And as for our listeners, so they know, you're kind of a movie star here, You've had the opportunity to do a lot of on-screen stuff. You talk about some of these things that you're talking about, but you had an opportunity to do a lot on different channels that you've done, not only in the Bureau, but since you retired from the Bureau. And you have this one that's coming up. It's called The Death Coast. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. I've been diving a very long time, and every one of the projects I've been on that have been on TV, it's probably been, even just short spots, have been because of the friends I've met through diving. And this one was, I met this guy up in Canada about 7 years ago, and went up to go diving up there in Nova Scotia in the Cape Breton Island. Did some dives up there, got to meet him. His name is Jeff McKinnon, super guy. He's got him and his family had been treasure hunters for a couple of generations. It was then outlawed in Canada, I think in 2010 or 2012. What Jeff wanted to do was because Oak Island had come in and they had gotten a permit to search for treasure in Canada under a special permit, he wanted to see if he could get a permit. And his idea was to bring in military and law enforcement guys, and some specifically guys who, had PTSD issues, had TBI, traumatic brain injuries, been in combat, and get them active diving in these areas looking for treasure. And production companies kind of took a different bend on it. They got a little bit away from that dual kind of project where you had, repairing soldiers and first responders and searching for treasure. When more of a searching for treasure, it's not about us. It's more about Jeff, the family legacy, and the nautical history of that area, where the French and the English were fighting over Canada back in the early 1700s, prior to our revolution. So, as luck would be, they narrowed it down from 12 divers to 4. I got cut, and then somebody else got cut, so I came in as the backup, and I was one of the original 4. One fell by the wayside, so there's mainly 3 divers, and we're interacting with Jeff McKinnon. The other 2 guys, one guy is a cop from Randolph Township. I actually knew him when I was a kid. He was a cop in the town I grew up in. And the other guy is a former Marine, very decorated Marine from Iraq.
You talk about this North Atlantic. I don't know if you guys remember the movie The Perfect Storm. Remember that movie?
I remember watching The Perfect Storm as we got blown out to leave to go to the Andrea Durian Montauk. And we're watching that movie. We're like, yeah, good thing we didn't go.
Yeah. Well, they say that it's probably one of the places on Earth that has the harshest weather and storms. And these storms are violent, and there's hundreds and hundreds of ships that have been lost. In doing some of my research, I'm fascinated by this. And I'm going, wow. I mean, I always, you think about hunting for stuff and you go down, you have no idea what you're going to find. And I think that's the fun in it, that you're looking and you're wondering.
Ray, that is almost exactly what I say to people about diving for me. I live in Florida now. There's all kinds of beautiful reefs and colorful fish and turtles and all that. And I do those dives. I've done a lot of those dives. But to me, diving is about going down the anchor line and not knowing what's on the other end. Dropping an anchor on some snag, they call them snags, okay? The fishermen go out with their nets out, their nets get snagged, there's something there, okay? Probably a shipwreck. In New Jersey, you've got basically a sand bottom. There's really no rocky outcrops. So if your nets get snagged, you're on a shipwreck. So now they have to mark those down so they don't run over and lose their gear. And if you happen to know a fisherman, you have to buy them a couple of beers. Sometimes they'll give you snag numbers. And some years back, some of the guys I was diving with off of New Jersey got snag numbers, dropped an anchor on it, went down the anchor line 230 feet of water, and there was a Type 7C German U-boat. Unbeknownst.
Wow.
So those kind of discoveries, that's what I do here on my free time, is out looking at marks that are just sonar targets on the bottom that are small, dropping an anchor on them, go down and see what's there. We're missing at least two 1715 fleet ships here. I believe one from 1550. There's a couple other missing Spanish galleons in this area in deeper water that I'm searching for. But again, like you said, for me, the excitement is going down the anchor line, not knowing what's going to be there until you get there. That's the.
Mike, I've seen the trailer, and we played at the beginning of this episode, of course, and it's an amazing several months you spent there. I know you told me some of it, you weren't diving every day, but and some days weather would control that or different issues would come up, but you were in the water a lot. And none of the three of us as a kid anymore. You said after a while you were getting beat up a little bit, especially with the waves and the rocking back and forth, but obviously you survived it.
Well, I went up there with a bone-on-bone left knee, so that was not a good start. And every day we had the big mothership. Okay, we had like a 54-foot ship with a 34-foot beam. Our crew loved it, a lot of room. They had all kinds of space. We had to take all our dive gear, hand it down to a rubber Zodiac 9 feet down, climb down a ladder, get on the boat. Now we're on this little rubber boat. We're in the seas, anywhere from 2 to 6 foot seas, getting beat up. Put our gear on, and then you don't just go, okay, you got your gear on rolling water. No, you got cameras. So you guys have done camera work. Stop. We want to get our cameras right here. We got to do this. We got a drone that's going to be over here. Got to get the drone in position. Oh, the drone batteries did. Oh, stay right there. Now you're in a full face mask, a dry suit. You're sitting on a boat that's moving around, getting beat up, and it's hot when you're in that stuff until you get in the water and you cool off. So you're sitting there waiting for the drone operator to get the battery back, and you're like, come on, guys, let's just get in the water. And then you get in the water. Now you're fighting a current. There was kelp 3 to 4 feet high. So you're in the kelp, and that's wrapping around your legs and around your mask and around your face. So you're pulling the kelp out, you're scrambling at the kelp, you're taking a knife cutting that, you're fighting the whole way, you're in current, you're in surge. Then you're digging and moving rocks around looking for a target, a magnetometer, a metal detector hits. You're working for an hour and 15 minutes. Then you get done, you take your gear off, you hand it up to the boat, you climb back up on the boat, and you do that 3 to 4 times a day. And then you get back to the boat, the big boat, you climb up the ladder with what you've got, and then you show, the producer and the camera guys and Jeff what you found in that dive. And you do that from the beginning of the morning. You steam out 2 hours, do 3 or 4 dives a day, get beat up, come up, eat lunch, go back in the water. And every day, the seas were good. If we had time where you had 8 days of good weather. We went out 8 days in a row. There's no time to repair. So I tore both shoulders and my right quad. So I was pretty much worthless by the end of the show.
Wow. Did they make you wear the cameras on you, or did they have someone following you?
But we had underwater videographers, but they would also, we had a full face mask on. And we had some mounting brackets made by a buddy of mine. And we'd mount lights on them and GoPro cameras on them. So you have all this stuff sticking off your face, which you have to make sure you don't lose. So we would often have GoPros on them too to get the diver's view. I'm working in a hole. Oh my God, I got a cannonball. So you get to see what the diver sees when he's actually digging up the targets. And then you have the cameraman going around and doing everything else.
Any dangerous sea creatures in that area that time of year?
One guy said he saw a shark. I didn't see a shark. We had seals.
That's what I meant.
Yeah, I didn't see any sharks. They're there, and they know you're there. You just don't generally see them. This was actually pretty good, but I didn't see any sharks. We did see a number of pilot whales. We saw seals all over the place. The biodiversity up there is really beautiful. We had a mola came right by the boat. They're very curious, and they're really interesting looking fish. Look them up on the internet. You'll see what they look like. They're crazy looking.
Mola?
Mola, also known as the ocean sunfish.
So I don't want to give away what the show, what you find or anything like that. But can you I know they watched the teaser. Can you tease them a little bit more? What are you looking for? What are you hoping to find?
Unlike like where I live, the 1715 fleet. Where I live is called the Treasure Coast because the 1715 fleet ran aground here during a hurricane. Those were treasure ships. Treasure was mined in South America, Central America, and Mexico by the Spanish and then being transported back to Spain. These ships were warships. And they were carrying money, but it was mostly salaries for the soldiers that were there. They were paying them in coin. So there was treasure on these wrecks. There was gold and silver. Back in the day, these were producing a lot of that. But much like the 1715 fleet wrecks, they had been dove for quite some time. So they've been hit. So you'll hear Jeff on there screaming, "Go get me some gold," and we're rolling in the water and we're diving. And we did come up with some pretty interesting coins. We found piles of cannons. We found cannonballs. We found musket shot. We found all kinds of parts of the ship. At the very end, I got lucky, and I found something that we didn't even know what it was until we opened it up. Got some very interesting, exciting finds.
Well, let me ask you this. The things you found, does Jeff get to keep those things, or they become part of the production team?
No,
Canada.
They go to the Canadian government. They're going to eventually put stuff in a museum. We found, a lot of interesting stuff. And we had an archaeologist. We had 2 archaeologists on site. They were directing the recovery of items. We would call them on comms and tell them what we had. They tell us whether they wanted it or not. We'd have to photograph it in place, videotape it in place, showcases, mark it. They're not shipwrecks like you would think, like there's the sunken ship laying on its side and the mast is up. It's not like that at all. These are very, very, very rough waters. There's no wood left. There's no wood there. It's all been busted up and long since gone. Everything else has fallen down, and it's down in these rocks, sometimes massive rocks, 20, 30 feet high, in these crevices where we have to dig out and find whatever we find, whatever the metal detector hits on.
What's the average depth of some of these dives on this Canadian trip?
Most of
the Death Coast.
Most of the stuff is very shallow. There were times where my fins were up in the air, they were out of the water. So I was in 6, 7 feet of water. We were right on the coast. We would go in by boat because you couldn't go on from a rocky coast. It wasn't like a New Jersey shore where you could just walk off on the sand. These were rocky, treacherous coasts. But we were mostly in between 20 and 40 feet of water. I think we had a couple of dives in 60 or 70 feet of water. We had relatively small tanks, 80 aluminum tanks. So it wasn't technical diving. I wasn't diving a rebreather or arch doubles, anything like that. It would have been almost impossible to do that out of these the little Zodiac we're in. But it was relatively shallow. That's why we were able to get an hour, 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes out of a tank of air in those conditions. The conditions made it tough and on air supply because you're fighting and working the whole time. Depths were not really anything to be concerned about.
Well, that makes sense. When you think about it, you say, well, the water's kind of shallow. People are going, well, how do these ships wreck up? But the point is that the coastline where they're coming in is lined with hidden reefs, ragged cliffs, submerged rocks, and that's what sinks the ships.
Right. And you got to remember, this is the early 1700s. They didn't have nautical charts. They didn't have chart plotters. They didn't have GPS. They didn't have land sea. They had a sextant, and they're trying to take sights off of a moon sighting in the middle of the night, and the ship that's rocking and moving and going in whatever direction. So, while celestial navigation was quite an art, it wasn't exact, and you didn't have reliable charts of the area. As a matter of fact, the first ship that we dive on there, called the Chameau, is a French ship. There's a big rock that sticks at high tide. It comes out of the water. At low tide, it comes out of the water. At high tide, all you see is a little bit of breaking water over it. Okay? You have that breaking water, that means there's something relatively shallow underneath that. And at night, you're not going to see breaking water, and that rock is named Chameau Rock. That's the rock that Chameau hit and went down. And a lot of the ships ran right aground. There were other steamships that we found that were well known in the area that were right along the beach. Just covered with shipwrecks.
Mike, how many episodes total is The Death Coast?
So 8 episodes for this season.
And it's going to premiere on Tuesday, April 1st for the next 8 or so Tuesdays in a row?
Right, 10 p.m. following Oak Island.
And we're going to see you on each episode?
Hopefully I'll be underwater during most of those. That's where I mostly was.
They didn't hire you for your looks?
No, they didn't hire me for my looks.
You're like that. We have faces. We got faces for radio.
I was the middle guy on the boat. The young guy was 55, was the Marine, and the police officer is 71. So we had three old beat up guys doing this diving.
Yet you found some interesting stuff I happen to know, and we're not going to give anything away, but I know it kind of builds up to a very interesting ending. And folks, if you're into water or history, diving, compelling storylines, this is the show you really want to check out. I know a little bit more about it than we discussed here. So, Mike, thanks. Ray, any last comments or questions here? We'll take us out.
Mike, I'm sold. I mean, hey, look, your career and some of the things you've done are simply amazing. Thank you for your service. And I'm telling you, I can't wait for this show to come on.
Thanks.
I'm watching it.
I think it's fun. I think it's going to be fun. And there's some adversity, and there's some, it's all real life. None of this was scripted. This is not scripted reality. They didn't give me, lines to read. We had guys got in positions they shouldn't have been in, and I'm barking orders, and we're screaming at each other to get things done right. We can't afford people drifting away in the ocean. So there was some adversity, and there was some real tough times.
I just have to ask you one question. When you were doing this, did anybody come up to you and say, hey, where's my camera?
Where's my camera?
Like, where's my radio?
No, nobody accused me of stealing or losing any cameras. Although I think there was some stuff lost. None of it was mine, so we were good there.
That's good. That's good.
I'm going to take us out, but I want to share an anecdote. I think you and I never actually physically met. We may have been in an elevator in the New York office, but we worked different squads. But in 2017, when Manhunt Unabomber came out, and it was, I was part of that show, and it was a mini series about, of course, the Unabomb case over 8 weeks. There was like 2 or 3 guys on this XG Boys list, retired agents that were getting into attack mode for me, like as if how dare I make this mini series and not include this guy or that guy. And I'm going back and forth. It's not a documentary. I lost control. I'm only the tech advisor. I couldn't say this, that, or the other. And out of the blue comes a guy, Mike Pizzio, say, hey, everybody. I've worked on these types of shows, some other dive shows you did, and the producers, the directors take over. They put out there whatever they want. They slice, they dice. Now yours were more reality or docu-based. This was a scripted series. But I'll never forget, Mike, and I've always to this day appreciated you just injecting yourself in these kind of arguments going back and forth. All I did in that series was try to make the FBI look good. And of course, some people argued and this, that, and the other. But in the end, we caught the Unabomber in real life as well as in this series. So, Mike.
Yeah, I look good, Fitz. All I was really doing there is FBI agents, are very well-rounded individuals across the board, but they don't know, generally speaking, what goes on TV magic. Okay.
Yes.
And they don't know what the difference between a docu-series is and a scripted reality series. I've been involved in a couple of these where certain, producers were trying to bend that in, and they would kind of ambush you and try to get you to say things that you didn't want to say, and I just kind of turned a blind eye to it. But you don't have editorial control on these TV shows.
You don't.
You're never going to get it.
And if you ask for it, they wouldn't give it to you. Fine, we'll get someone else to help us. So I wanted the story told right. And of course, the one thing they didn't, that wasn't reality, Fitz didn't sit down with Kaczynski and interview him across the table. But I said, besides that, the rest of the series is relatively accurate. But these couple guys were just on me. One I knew, another one I didn't. But my fourth book's coming out, and I addressed that in, I think, the next to last chapter of this guy kind of making a fool of himself. But anyway, thanks again, Mike. I'll say it publicly here. You didn't even know me, but you came to my defense, just if nothing else, just explaining how these TV shows work and how the person involved, the tech advisor, whatever, can lose all control in terms of the eventual story they want to tell. So again, thanks again for coming forth, a guy you didn't even know, but it shows you're a stand-up guy, and you can always tell the difference in the bureau who are the stand-up guys and who are not.
They're not hard to fight.
They're not. You don't have to be a profiler to do that. Again, Mike and Ray, as usual, thank you. Everyone out there, thanks for tuning into this special episode. One more time, The Death Coast on the History Channel airs Tuesday, April 1st, 2025. Check it out. I'm sure there'll be other ways of accessing it, streaming and all that kind of stuff with the website. Thanks for watching this episode of Cold Red. Make sure to follow us on social media, subscribe, check us out, coldredpodcast.com for earlier episodes. Thanks to Matt McLaughlin, Matt Robinson, our producers, Rick Schilling, our music director, and everyone. We will see you next time. Ray, Mike, thanks again. See you guys soon.
Thanks, guys.